And of course, I'm just thinking, oh my God. So we had to do a lot of work about that, because why would someone think that the police are ever supposed to beat you up? So I have to try and get a police officer to actually tell them that the police aren't supposed to beat you up if you have a bad attitude. You know what I mean? Like it was such a given within their context and their lives, and we had a lot of middle-aged people who had been involved in drugs for a very long time in the initial part of Madu. We have a very large membership. But anyway, it's a what do I call it? It's a project we're doing in the sense that rather than, again, clientizing the drug users and saying, we've got a campaign that's going to get the public to treat you better, why not get the drug users to feel better about themselves? Because it will be lost on them if they're not treated with stigma and they still have their own internalized depression. So it's my plea for drug user groups getting funded. These are the groups that are involved in we started a methadone group very, very early. I don't know if you've heard, they've taken the government to court because their methadone money was being taken from their food money and mailed directly from welfare to a doctor as if they need more funding. Just kind of sorry. And I don't know if you've seen how small a welfare check is, that's why I make that remark, but they've now, it would appear that it's a successful suit, and there's going to be 70% of a $7.2 million settlement, and people will be making application to get their money back, and how are they going to be paid? And it looks like they're going to get $150 checks per month, or, you know, which is hardly going to put a dent in their welfare. But I'm just saying, this is a tremendously satisfying thing for a group of people who have not been treated well. And the whole thing was, one, based on that. What other illness you get diagnosed by a physician, and then they take your food money to pay a clinic fee with it. So they're still having clinic fees sent to doctors, but it's not coming out of their food money on their actual welfare check. I consider that, I mean, that took, that group formed in 1998, and what year is it? So it's a long time. But I think that it speaks volumes to what can happen when people just keep, persistence is pretty much everything in this business. And so the Rural Empowered Network is you guys' drug user group here, and they're all coming to the thing in Abbotsford next week. If the weather lets them out of here. So it's been a real pleasure, though, because they've been able to invite, I don't know if you guys even know this group exists, they invite the city folks to come up to a camping trip. And it's the people who come really are very grateful and come up, and they have a good time. And I don't think we've killed anyone yet. And the Society of Living Injection Drug Users, or illicit, I don't know what illicit drug users.
They changed it.
They changed it, yeah. That's the group in Victoria, and they are, we're eager to have them come and present on Tuesday, or Monday, or it's Tuesday next week, because they're going to talk about how they're running OPSs, and it's actually a really brilliant model. I don't know if you got that from Tyndall. An OPS is like, wow, it's the alley, or that hidden place where people are using drugs, just brought inside, so that the naloxone kit's right there. I mean, that's why we did the one we did. I was involved in it. You just can't keep running down the alley and trying to find the people, and then when you open up your kit, it's empty. One early lesson, I don't know, the ambulance guys, we started going, don't let them leave with the overdose person until they give us more naloxone, because we don't have any more. And we just started having these large numbers of overdoses. So they've got, their model is a paramedic with a drug user, a peer worker. And it's a very powerful message to someone who comes to that site that you're not really a client when you come there. You're somebody who might become a volunteer at that site. And it's a different kind of way of entering a place. If you go to a community center and you could join the community center board, but you are there to take swimming lessons, it's a different relationship than you're screwed up, we're not, come here, we'll fix you, or punish you, or change you, or something. But you know what I mean? That unequal relationship isn't ideal. And one of the great pleasures of, and there's some things that aren't really good about working with drug users, you have to learn how, it's so reflective of your own weaknesses, because you have to be so emotionally mature to deal with people who might yell at you and behave badly, as I call them, tough customers, or whatever. So you get a lot of chances for self-development. That's a bonus. We were just taught to do this, right? That's what I took home from work today. The great thing is that they're your colleague, and it's a very different relationship. And you learn a tremendous amount about different cultures. at one point, Vandu had a board that was all men and no whites. And I'm white and I'm female. And so there was a discussion, and others, Manny Woods came to town. She's a black woman. She's an ex-user. She died. But anyway, she was just brilliant. And I said to her, so, Manny, what's going on here? How come everybody's of color? There were native, black guy, black guy. I mean, it's like there are, you know. She said, oh, that's because they can't pass anyway. When they go in a store, they get followed around as if they were a drug user, even if they're not a drug user. And I thought, oh, okay. But we have the discussions within the group to say, who's missing here? Why don't we have women? And, you know, should we start a women's group? And, you know what I mean? Not just to go around going, oh, God, we got a woman who's native and a drug user. Oh, let's get her on the board because she meets 3 of our requirements for us to say we're inclusive. We don't do it that way at Vandu. We just try to do it organically so that there's enough people coming. It's a very, very popular group. We had to fight off a lot of people with mental illnesses, and I kept saying to the mental illness people, could you start something good for these people so they'll just, because I don't like turning people away, but the group that you're inviting people to is, they're finally invited to something that they're usually excluded for. They're drug use. They're usually excluded, and now that makes them qualified. So her quote about people feeling a little taller is a very powerful one, especially if they've never heard of a drug user group. It's also an international social justice network, and Vandu ended up making, I've got a few copies. If you take Stigma to the other extreme, you'll end up with a manifesto. And it's a really interesting thing because it is not far from the other movements about that people have the right to ingest substances into their bodies as they see fit. And it can be startling when you say, we have the right to prepare, ingest, and be high on drugs. And you go, huh, well that's kind of bullshit. But if you say, we have the right to prepare, ingest, and be high on wine, people wouldn't think that was that bad, really. And we do have that right now, all of us. And so it can be a bit startling, even, you know, the years and years I've worked with people who use drugs, it can seem like one of the underbellies of drug user groups is they can just turn into parties. We have the right to party, fuck you, we're here, we're high, get over it. And there's not that so much sentiment with the Vandu group because we're facing so much other stigma. This project that we ended up taking on that was very, you'd think that's unusual, was a pedestrian safety project. But we got ICBC wasn't helpful, but some geography students did this study. And you should have seen how many people were dying and being hurt in our neighborhood. So it's a public health issue. And we were good at public health issues, so we did just saying, drug user groups can do very, very powerful work, and they're sort of lined up. We're always turning people away who want to do activities and be volunteers. The other thing is that we do use cash at all times for all activities. So if you go to a meeting, you get $3, I think. And it was because bus fare used to be $1.50 in Vancouver. It's not anymore. In 1997, I think. So I think they're getting $5 finally last year or this year. And we still haven't never really gotten any more money. But there's this idea about people who would normally be picking cigarette butts off the street or standing in a food line that can leave with a tiny amount of cash. I believe Redun's doing a very similar kind of model where we're covering. So when they come down to Vancouver, they'll get $35 a day for a stipend. They'll get 3 meals, because we're so poor, we would give them more, I suppose, and their transportation and motels covered. And it's just to treat people, to think of it from their point of view, because one of the ways, and I had to sell this to the health department, you know, to get the money for the group, people shouldn't be hurt by coming and doing volunteer work. So at the OPS, our OPS anyway, you get $40 for 4 hours work, which is just under minimum wage. And I encourage them not to report it because it's a stipend, and even North Shore Search and Rescue gets stipends, and they don't have to declare them. So we're as good as North Shore Search and Rescue, I'll tell you. And so I just say it's a meal allowance or something, and don't declare it. So the Western Aboriginal Harm Reduction Association, more than half our members were Aboriginal people. So I started as the committee, and I was quickly straightened out that they don't have committees, they have councils, or whatever. It was like, you know, you unleash these things, and they are very powerfully owned by groups of people who want to you write a constitution and bylaws. Of these, the registered ones are BCAPOM is a registered nonprofit society, or you can't go to court because that's a good reason to form the nonprofit society. We use the running of the society for the most part as the programming because we have no resources. And there's plenty of programming in terms of reading spreadsheets for the funding that you got, completing a report, and they're all working with BCAPOM's worked with scientists, Western Aboriginal Harm Reduction Societies worked with researchers and has published peer-reviewed papers that they have been the cohort for. The people that were so interested in wars were the BC Centre for Excellence on HIV/AIDS. They said to people, do you use clean syringes every time and a condom every time you have sex? And they said, yes. And then there they were, seroconverting and having HIV. And they said, pretty sure they're not able to tell us. So they started holding these healing circles and a different kind of context for people to be able to talk about those subjects, having sex and sharing equipment. So it was just a whole different context. And the amount of money, if you could put on a wars meeting once a week in Vancouver for $8,000 a year, and that I think includes a retreat. So it's incredibly small amounts of money that are used in these very, very positive ways. And they change people's lives. So I guess I can stop talking now. And,
I think we've got...
If you want to take any of these, I have a few.
I don't think we'll do this last question, but maybe we'll encourage people to reflect on it themselves, and we'll, yeah, and we'll take some questions from the audience. If there are.
Just a quick one. You talk about people who are drug users, but I don't know anyone who isn't a drug user.
I agree.
So why is it the illegal drugs that make it the stigma? Because certainly, I don't know anyone who isn't a drug user, whether it's coffee, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, commercial cigarettes, and there's no more drugs more dangerous than commercial cigarettes and alcohol, at least in the long term. So is it the stigma because it's illegal, or is it things that maybe needle users use, do, like leaving needles in a park? And what's causing the stigma? Why do some people get it and why drinkers?
I think it's the criminalization, and I think that Hollywood has worked on everybody in terms of the stigma against people who use drugs, particularly intravenously. You can't, Susan Boyd wrote a book about it, and she analyzed a lot of Hollywood films. And I mean, every Adam 12 episode, they're Rockford file, they slam some guy, and he's a junkie, and then he sells out his mother. It was just this horrible kind of sleazy, like, I don't know, you guys could give me input, I think that's what it was. I didn't really have a TV, but the few times I saw TV, that's what it was they were doing. But, and the drug users internalize that as well. And I agree, I mean, I'm in court, and some woman stabbed Picton. I don't know if you know this. And she could have been able to charge him. He tried to kill her, and she stabbed him. I don't know if you know this. It's the most heroic story I ever heard in my life. And she runs screaming, bloody and naked with one handcuff on her arm to the road. Someone gave her a ride to the hospital. He goes to the hospital. He's in the next room. They take the key out of his pocket and take her handcuff off. If he had died, they would have charged her with murder. What was interesting was that when they were going to have her be the witness and he tried to murder her and they charged him with attempted murder, all the prosecutor would say was, she used drugs, she wasn't abstinent. I thought, who in this room's abstinent? You gotta be like a Seventh-day Adventist or something, like to be like abstinent. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. And it was so profound that someone would let a murderer go. She had 7 other criminal charges against her that the police had brought, so she was okay to charge. But if she was trying to say, what actually happened to her, if she had been believed and he was arrested, it would have saved at least 14 women's lives. So it's a really interesting kind of discrimination. I mean, it's not inconsequential, is why I'm pointing out that story.
I think I can probably talk about that. I'll project. You talked about some large-scale strategies for assisting people who use drugs in healthcare. I'm a fourth year nursing student, and there's quite a few of us who have experience in the hospital with clients who are drug users and are being denied appropriate pain management because of their addiction. And I'm just wondering if you have any like strategies that we can use to help advocate for them in hospital.
Yeah, wow, that's a tough situation to be in. I expect, especially for nursing students, there are so many hierarchies in that situation that it can be really tough to challenge it in the moment and then on a broader scale. I mean, in the moment, I always think that the strategies to use are to get people out of the situation and talk to more powerful people about what they're doing in an evidence-based way as you can, but in a way that allows them to save face, because directly challenging people in those circumstances can bring about the opposite of what you want to happen. But I think in the broader scale is a place where students especially have so much potential. They're so eager to make things better, and the more you can get involved in committees and organizations of nursing students and interprofessional health education to work towards changes and to say that, look, we need comprehensive pain management. That includes appropriate dosing that respects people's previous tolerance. It includes a whole range of strategies where people feel they have a sense of control in the hospital because that decreases their pain independent of whatever medications they're getting. And involving people who use drugs in those and listening to their experience is part of it. I mean, I would encourage you to find those opportunities to get involved in the hospital leadership and in your professional organizations. There's an incredible group of harm reduction nurses I see them on Twitter, but I know they have other ways that they communicate. Facebook too. Yeah, I mean, I would encourage you to get involved there. There's so much to learn from those folks and their experience as well.
I just had a question about supervised injection pop-up sites. just curious. I mean, those things are always resource heavy, but any just brief tips about key things that make those things successful?
Well, it depends, if you got funding or not. My sense is because Terry Bake woke up at 4 in the morning and thought of us freezing in those tents. And then he got up the next day and wrote a ministerial order that what we were doing would be funded and legal, I suppose, in some weird kind, a ministerial order. So I think that breakthrough's been attained. The model I like is where you're both, like the solid model. I haven't heard them present yet, so I'm eager to hear how they negotiated a paramedic and a drug user. The drug user, I don't know if you understand this, well, I guess you guys may be in a different situation. When we're in a situation, like not a small town, and we've got lots of drug users there, someone can come in, and the drug users know the scene. They might know that guy's psycho, and there's a way they can alert you, because you don't have the same spidey sense they do, and you don't have the same knowledge. I don't hang around, I don't know enough. I'm just saying. So the other part is then, nurses are quite restricted from being in OPSs, as far as I can tell. And we've got lots of nurses who come in their off hours and volunteer still at the OPS. I think a mix of users and non-users is very important. If the users can make the thing strong, except on welfare week when they're all either loaded or don't show up. So I'm just saying. And then there's lots and lots of training opportunities, and constantly trying to get people to work cooperatively with one another. What you're doing in that situation is you're getting the most real-time information about the drugs. You'll be the first to find out that there's something killing people, or for a while we had people going frozen, and then you tip them back and their legs go up in the air like a bug, and you can't get them in the door. They're really, really hard to revive. So I'm sure the nurses actually at Insight they've never trained us, but I know they have a lot of discussion about that, because when someone freezes up like that and you're trying to do this CPR, it's a little rough. Anyway, I'm just saying that's one of the great things. The other thing is partnership with researchers. See if you can find someone who's interested enough to collect some of your data, and then view the project as a changing, responsive. Make sure that when you're running it, you're clear that you may have to make changes all the time, and always encourage a place for people to smoke drugs, and always encourage that they shouldn't be allowed to run injection sites without toilets. you know, and then you've got to get smart enough to be able to not have anyone die in the toilet. So I'm just saying, it's okay. I mean, Moss Park I watch all of the ones coming along, and I think that the simplest thing, and it was done in Rotterdam in, I don't know, 1979 or something, I don't know, so a long time ago. In the olden days, the first people that were invited inside to eject were by a guy in a church, and I believe he was like a priest, and he said he was coming, he kept walking through this garden to go into the church, and there'd be dead bodies, people shooting drugs with puddle water and shit. And he just said, come in here and use your drugs. And that place operated for a very, very long time. And it was the fact that it was a church made it so I don't know if the police wanted to bust it or, you know what I mean? You can get right into the politics of it. But I think in this town, it would be understood that if you had a couple of clients that you wanted to say to them, we'll keep you safe, please don't use your drugs outside. Don't use them in the bathroom at the coffee shop. You know what I mean? Like, and say you can use them here. So it's awkward. Whether people think they're going to lose their funding over it, and of course, what about the smokers? So there's a gazebo in the back of the homeless place. They're picking on the homeless place. Should be mean to them. It's you, isn't it? Oh my God. Anyway, I'll tell you, I'm jealous of that gazebo. We had tents. And the best tents are those automobile tents because the snow doesn't crush them as easily. I mean, you guys know about snow. We had snow last year. I can tell you, Vancouver's never had that much snow in all the years I've ever been there. So it was a real thing. We had lots of tents collapsing, but that one for cars, you know, that's on sale every September at Canadian Tire.
I'll just add one thing to that, which is that if there is the opportunity to get an overdose prevention site up and running in Nelson, share what you learned, because there is so much appetite in small communities around BC to implement these kind of models, and there's support from the provincial government to do it. We've got provincial guidelines about how to run them, and there's just an incredible amount of support and an incredible amount of knowledge that I'm sure you have to share.
Oh, and there's nothing wrong with doing a need-to-know basis. You know, like you don't have to run around and tell every neighbor that you know hates your guts and is just dying to come and picket your place. I don't know if that happens in this town. I'm just saying it does happen some places. So if the people who need to know about it are the first ones who know. When we did ours, we had operated for quite a few weeks, I think over a month before the media found out about us and came and did a story. We asked them not to do it until we felt like we could at least come along with our own level of chaos and hope.
We're pretty much there at the end. Thank you very much. Another compelling discussion. Lots of food for thought there. Your comments earlier, and about Heather Hay, just kind of threw that name out. I knew Heather Hay, and she was, you know, a director in the health authority, very influential person, and I thought it was really fascinating. You're running these off-the-cuff sites that there's 14 police officers there, and she's the one cracking jokes about why do we need all these police officers to get tables off the street. So I think it says a lot about having community activists like yourself to be able to advocate for peers doing this kind of work that's driving the needs, but also that we have people in our health authorities, et cetera, like I'm seeing here today, that are, you know, really buying into these progressive ideas to get some meaningful responses. So.
That book that was out on the it explains a lot of this kind of activism. It's called Fighting for Space, How Drug Users Changed the... There was a few copies out there. It's coming up. There'll be more copies. I brought 6 of them. I don't know who's got one. Anyway, if you're interested in all the anecdotal stories that are in that book, yeah, anyway. I've run out of copies, but they'll be in the bookstore.
So I just want to say thanks again to everyone who did present here today. We had Dr. Mark Tyndall earlier talking about his harm reduction, drug laws, and some really innovative strategies he brought forward. Chris Huston, administrator with IH and the 5-tier model. Thank you for that. Jamie Macbeth talking about some strategies within the naloxone. I noticed some really good technique injecting into oranges over there. So I don't know why I always think of that crazy movie, that big scene with the. It was way better than Pulp Fiction. You guys did a really good job there. As well, Dr. Helen Peel, some of those excellent strategies dealing with some of our traumas and how to be aware of those things. And of course, Anne and Alexis, thank you again for coming today. So we give them all. If you haven't completed your survey or your feedback forms, if you can do that, leave those on the desk. And I want to pass the mic over to just have one more thanks for the funders of this day today.
Well, actually, you're next. So I just wanted to thank, we wanted to thank Sarge for emceeing tonight, or today. Feels like nighttime already, doesn't it? You always step in when we ask, and we very much appreciate your assistance and your support.
Thank you.
And the organizing committee really wanted to thank the Community Action Initiative for the funding that made this event and the event that took place on November 22nd possible. Ankors received $15,000 to support this event. And we will be continuing to offer events like these in communities in the West Kootenays. Castlegar is the next organizing group, and if anybody is interested in participating in that, please let me know, and then I'll be calling you in January. So that was all. Thank you very much for your time and attention today, and for your work.